Hello! In this CMMI Tech Talk, we are going to review the Risk and Opportunity Management Practice Area, otherwise known as RSK, or RISK. We will discuss the intent of this practice area and look at what value it can provide to an organization, as well as looking at the individual practices to see how they can be used to improve an organization's approach to managing uncertainty. The Risk and Opportunity Management Practice Area falls within the Managing Business Resilience Capability area, which is in the Managing category. We shall start our tour by looking at the key mandatory model components, the high-level intent and value statements. Intent identifies, records, analyzes, and manages potential risks or opportunities. Value mitigates adverse impacts or capitalizes on positive impacts to increase the likelihood of meeting objectives. Focusing on the value statement initially, we see that the Risk and Opportunity Management Practice Area gives us the practices that we need to both mitigate against negative future events and capitalize on positive future events. Risks and opportunities are, in this sense, different sides of the same coin. If we look at the CMMI model glossary entries for both, we see that a risk is defined as a potential uncertain event that may be harmful or may negatively impact objective achievement. And an opportunity is an uncertain event that may positively impact meeting objectives. From these definitions, we can see that common to both risks and opportunities is the idea of uncertainty. No one has perfect foresight of all eventualities, so inevitably, in any endeavor, there is a degree to which uncertainties will play their part. We cannot remove uncertainties altogether, but we can try to be aware of areas where uncertainty may arise and then put in place actions to manage this uncertainty to ensure the most favorable outcome. The practices within the Risk and Opportunity Management Practice Area are all concerned with identifying areas of uncertainty and then implementing ways of handling them to ensure the best possible outcome for us. You will see when we look at the individual practices that all risk practice statements include the phrase risks or opportunities. We do not need to distinguish between the two. The practices are the same regardless of the nature of the uncertainty being managed. The practices of risk and opportunity management go up to practice group level 3 and reflect the expected evolutionary progression towards increasing capability. Starting at level 1, we are solely concerned with identifying and recording those potential areas of uncertainty that may affect us. At level 2, we start to think more deeply about the possible consequences of any identified risks and opportunities, and we periodically monitor them to see how their impact changes over time and then communicate their status to any stakeholders who may be affected by them. At level 3, we become much more proactive in managing risks and opportunities. We define and implement standardized ways of categorizing and assessing risks and opportunities, along with the processes needed to ensure that this happens routinely and consistently within the organization. And we also implement actions to attempt to manage them to ensure an optimal outcome. Let us turn now to the individual practices within the Risk and Opportunity Management Practice Area. Risk 1.1 is effectively asking us to undertake some basic situational awareness and to consider things that could happen which might have a positive or negative outcome on our objectives. We cannot hope to manage risks or opportunities if we are not aware of them. As with all CMMI practices, there is an expectation this will be performed continuously, not just at the initiation of a new project, for example. New risks or opportunities may come to light in response to activities carried out as the project progresses, and the characteristics of existing risks and opportunities may change as we progress, so we need to keep a constant watch for new or changed areas of uncertainty. Risk 2.1 takes the identification of risks and opportunities further by seeking for us to do some form of analysis on them. Typically, this would involve looking at the possible impact of the risk, how likely it is to occur, and when we might expect it to affect us. If we understand the impact of the risk or opportunity, we will have a good idea of how important it is relative to the others we may be tracking. A high-impact risk or opportunity is probably one that we want to expend more effort managing than a low-impact one. A similar argument applies when we look at the likelihood of the risk occurring. We would probably focus more of our attention on the risks or opportunities that are most likely to occur than those which are very unlikely. Consider the sort of thought processes we go through when looking at planning for our future financial security. Things like lottery wins could have a very high impact on our future financial well-being, but are extremely unlikely to occur, so usually we would focus more on low-risk, high and medium impact options such as pension funds. Understanding the time frame related to each risk or opportunity enables us to put these risks and opportunities into context and factor this in when formulating any response. Risk 2.2 calls for us to not only monitor our identified risks and opportunities, but to keep any stakeholders who might be impacted informed about the risk or opportunity status. We already discussed in Risk 1.1 that CMMI practices are intended to be performed continuously, and it should be clear that this practice is one in which the continuous nature is implicit within the practice intent. When we monitor risks, we reanalyze them and reassess their status. We determine if they have passed or if they are imminent, and we confirm our assessment of the impact and likelihood of occurrence given the information now available to us. This should be a routine activity performed at an appropriate and regular frequency. How regular will depend on the context and the nature of the work being performed. Traditional development organizations applying typical project management practices may have a regular weekly or fortnightly risk review meeting to reassess their risks and opportunities, whereas an agile development organization may look at development risks many times an iteration. For example, when they refine their backlog, they may examine the possible risks to establish the prioritized order of backlog items. The Level 3 practices provide a lot more detail about how risks and opportunities can be effectively managed, especially in a more organizationally focused way. Risk 3.1 introduces the concept of categories to help us better understand the nature and interrelationship between identified areas of uncertainty. CMMI is not prescriptive and does not define or recommend any particular risk categories. Identifying those categories that make sense for your business is the key to this practice. Hence, we might define categories to distinguish between business risks and opportunities and technical ones. For example, if we had an option to deliver a service such as a training course, either virtually or in person, we might want to identify those risks and opportunities that would apply specifically to a virtual delivery and those which apply to an in-person one. Then by weighing up the relative impacts of the risks and opportunities associated with each category, we might get a clearer view on what our preferred course of action might be. Risk 3.2 extends our ability to analyze risks and opportunities effectively by promoting the idea of parameters to better define and understand them. In Risk 2.1, we saw how we would typically look at things like probability of occurrence and impact when undertaking an analysis of areas of uncertainty. This practice formalizes this idea and looks for us to be more precise in our definition of these analysis parameters. Consider the probability of a risk or opportunity occurring. For example, in Risk 2.1, we used phrases like high or low to characterize the probability. The way different teams or individuals look at risk could have high and low being used inconsistently. For this practice, Risk 3.2, we need to be more precise and properly define the parameter. We can still use a basic high, medium, low scale if that makes sense for us to do so. Alternatively, we might go for a numeric 0 to n scale, or even a percentage probability. The key here is that by defining the parameters we use more precisely, we can start to be more consistent with how we perform risk and opportunity management across the organization. Risk 3.3 introduces the idea of a risk or opportunity management strategy. This is a conscious plan for the management of risks and opportunities within the organization. How do we do risk and opportunity management in this organization? The strategy should define all the risk categories and parameters we will use to analyze our risks and outline the actions to be taken to address and monitor risks. It may, for example, identify the conditions in which we must take action to address an identified risk using a heat map type of matrix, where risks identified as green can be largely ignored, whereas red ones must be actively managed. The risk and opportunity management strategy defines the general approach to managing uncertainty within the organization. Risk 3.4 then calls for individual risk and opportunity management plans to be put in place. For low-priority risks, these plans could simply be to observe and monitor the status to see if it changes over time. But for those that have been identified as important enough to worry about, a comprehensive management plan should be put in place to define what actions will be taken to mitigate the risk or to exploit an opportunity. With a management plan in place, monitoring our risks and opportunities becomes an exercise in evaluating how well the management plan is progressing. Risk 3.5 states we should implement our risk or opportunity management plans and evaluate how effective they have been. Have we taken the actions we said we were going to take? Did we achieve the level of mitigation or exploitation or opportunity we intended? And if not, what further actions should we take? Have we mitigated the risk sufficiently for us to be able to downgrade it to a lower priority one? Or have circumstances changed in such a way as to make the risk or issue even more important than it was the last time we looked at it? Remember, risk and opportunity management is about dealing with areas of uncertainty. Implicitly, this can be a very dynamic and volatile area to deal with, so our risk management approach needs to be flexible enough to handle this, and we need to be prepared to take actions to try to reduce the degree of uncertainty as far as possible. These then are the practices of the risk and opportunity management practice area. To summarize the main points, risk covers identifying and recording risks and opportunities, using categories and parameters to achieve a greater understanding as to the precise nature of the risk or opportunity, clear and transparent communication of risk and opportunity status with affected stakeholders, establishing a risk and opportunity management strategy, putting in place management plans for individual risks and opportunities, and implementing risk and opportunity management plans and analyzing the impact of actions taken. Thank you for joining us for this CMMI Tech Talk. If you have questions, please contact us at support.isaca.org.